My name is Isaac, and I am 47 years old man. A few months ago, I stared at a blood report longer than necessary. One number kept pulling my eyes back. HbA1c 6.1. Not diabetes, but no longer normal either. My doctor remained calm, professional, routine. You're pre-diabetic, a pause. Reduce sugar. Exercise more. Sleep better. Manage stress. Everything he said made sense. That was the strange part. I understood the biology. I understood the mechanism. I understood the numbers. Yet as I drove home beneath the white glow of traffic lights and illuminated billboards, I couldn't escape the feeling that something deeper had been left unsaid. Because the problem hadn't started with sugar. It had started years earlier, in the slow erosion of rhythm, late nights beneath artificial light, meals eaten while distracted, stress becoming so normal that my body stopped recognizing what rest actually felt like. Days spent staring at screens longer than sunlight. Movement reduced to scheduled exercise inside buildings. Human beings were never designed to inhabit for so many hours. And now, for the first time, my body had answered back. Not dramatically, quietly. Like a warning light blinking for years inside a machine nobody had stopped long enough to inspect. At first, I wanted to believe it wasn't serious. It's only 6.1, I told myself. I'll deal with it later. For a few days, I almost convinced myself nothing needed to change. But deep down, I knew that number hadn't appeared overnight. And somewhere beneath the anxiety of the diagnosis, another question quietly emerged. What if my body wasn't betraying me? What if it had been trying to warn me all along? The signal. For the next few weeks, I approached the problem the only way I knew how. Like an engineer, blood sugar graphs, calories, carbohydrates, step counts, sleep scores. The modern world had trained me well. Every symptom was something to suppress. Every problem was something to optimize. Every body was a system to control. At first, it felt productive, until one night, sitting alone in my apartment, staring at another graph glowing against the darkness, I came across a sentence that unsettled me more than the diagnosis itself. What if the number isn't the problem? What if it's the signal? I read it again. The signal. I couldn't stop thinking about those words, because suddenly my rising blood sugar no longer felt like an isolated malfunction. It felt like communication, a body adapting to years of chronic stress, artificial rhythms, constant stimulation, sleep deprivation, emotional exhaustion, a nervous system that no longer remembered what safety felt like. And for the first time, I considered something modern life rarely asks. What if metabolic disease isn't only about food? What if it's about the structure of the life we built? Because somewhere along the way, life had become continuation. No pauses, no silence, no true rest, only acceleration. The Japanese have a beautiful word, ma, the space between things, the pause that gives rhythm its meaning, the silence that allows the nervous system to settle. When I heard that word, I realized something uncomfortable. My life had no ma, only movement, only noise. Even rest had become another productivity project. The older rhythms, I started reading, not searching for miracle cures, not rejecting science, trying to understand context. Because modern health conversations often treat the body as though it exists in isolation. Older cultures rarely did. Across indigenous traditions, health was never separated from relationship. Relationship with land, with food, with movement, with seasons, with community, with time itself. In Ayurveda, I discovered Agni, the digestive fire. Health wasn't determined only by what we ate. It was shaped by the state we lived in while eating. Stress weakened digestion. Irregular rhythms weakened balance. Late-night eating disrupted the body's internal intelligence. The body listened to how life felt. That idea stayed with me, because modern people often talk about stress as if it exists only in the mind. The body doesn't make that distinction. The nervous system records everything. Years later, neuroscience would explain the same truth in different language. Chronic stress can alter hormones, sleep, appetite, and even insulin sensitivity. Science wasn't contradicting ancient wisdom. It was describing another part of the same story. The Lakota say, "Mitakaye o yasing." All my relations. The Māori speak of Whakapapa, the invisible relationships connecting people, ancestors, land, and life. Different cultures, different languages. The same reminder. Human beings are shaped by the systems they live inside. Slowly, something painful became clear. My body wasn't reacting to one bad habit. It was reacting to the architecture of my existence. The dinner table. One evening I sat down for dinner. When I finished, I realized I couldn't remember tasting a single bite. The television murmured in the background. My phone vibrated beside my plate. Half my attention was still trapped inside unfinished work. I wasn't eating, I was processing. And suddenly, I saw my life. Wake up, scroll, work, reply, consume, repeat. Even rest had become performative. Sleep trackers, productivity podcasts, morning routines, optimization. Everything had become another project, and nowhere inside that system was peace. That frightened me, not because of the blood test, because I realized I had become absent from my own life. My body wasn't exhausted by accident. It had been carrying a life my nervous system no longer trusted. The experiment. I didn't abandon modern medicine. I still trusted my doctor. I still tracked my blood work. I still believed in science. But I decided to change something deeper. The conditions my body was living inside. Not perfectly. Some nights I still worked too late. Some weekends I ordered takeaway and ate in front of a screen. Old habits returned more easily than I expected. Change wasn't dramatic. It was repetitive, patient. I slowed my meals, put my phone away, stopped eating standing up. Before each meal, I paused for a few seconds. At first, the silence felt uncomfortable. Then it became something I looked forward to. I returned to simpler foods, lentils, vegetables, fermented foods, traditional grains, local produce, foods connected to land, foods that required time. I stopped eating beneath bright artificial light late into the night. After dinner, I walked instead of returning immediately to a screen. Some mornings I stood among trees, no headphones, no podcasts, no productivity goal, just presence. The Japanese call it Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing, not exercise, not achievement. Simply allowing the nervous system to remember what nature feels like. And slowly I noticed something modern health conversations rarely mention. The body responds to emotional atmosphere. Urgency changes hunger, loneliness changes inflammation, stress changes metabolism. The nervous system listens to the texture of our lives. For years, mine had been living as though danger never ended. The return. The changes arrived quietly. Better sleep, steadier energy, fewer crashes after meals. The constant craving for stimulation slowly faded. For the first time in years, I could recognize real hunger, real fatigue, real fullness. My body was becoming readable again. Months later, I returned to my doctor. Another blood test, another number. My HbA1c had improved, but strangely, that was no longer the most important thing, because the deeper transformation wasn't numerical, it was relational. My relationship with food had changed. My relationship with time had changed. My relationship with rest had changed. My relationship with myself had changed. My body was no longer something to control. It had become something else, a guide. The body remembers. These days, I still check my blood work. I still respect medicine. I still believe in science. The numbers matter, but they no longer tell the whole story. Every morning, before I reach for my phone, I open a window. I notice the air, the light, the silence before the world accelerates again. And sometimes, I realize something that never occurred to me before that blood test. My body was never trying to betray me. It was trying to protect me, trying to pull me back from a way of living that was quietly exhausting me. The older traditions understood this long before modern science found the language to explain it. Healing is not always dramatic. Sometimes it begins with something much smaller. Eating with attention, walking with presence, sleeping with rhythm, creating enough stillness for the nervous system to remember what safety feels like. I used to believe that health meant controlling my body. Now I believe something different. The body responds to the way life is lived. And perhaps, for many of us, the path back to health is not about becoming modern superhumans. Perhaps it is about remembering how to live like human beings again. Because maybe the body remembers what modern life forgot. Thank you for listening to my story. This is Land and Life, and perhaps the signal was never the enemy after all.